Welcome back to Get Good Talks, where a few good gamers think outside of the box. My name's Delapo, and today we are joined by Rachel from Persephonics herself.
Hello, friends, and hello, my friends out there. It is glorious to be here.
Well, thank you. We are absolutely honored to have you. So the subject today we are going to be covering is female protagonists in gaming and the various things that go into having a female character in your game and the representation overall. So,
fantastic.
Right? Isn't it?
Absolutely.
The first thought for this subject came to me after watching a behind-the-scenes type of video on Horizon Zero Dawn. During the video, several subjects were brought up, things like the setting, the inspiration, and of course the main character. The main point that stuck with me during all of this was Aloy's character as a whole. The fact video, which I will be linking below, stated this: Aloy isn't the kind of woman who is concerned about her beauty or what she wears. She's a soldier and a survivalist. A rebel who goes against the traditions and regulations of her tribe. Now I, ladies and gentlemen, have become very aware of a rather alarming trend in the field of video games, and it's a trend that many people notice but nobody really wants to talk about, and that is the quality of female protagonists that we are given in the medium. We as gamers seem to be given very little in the way of female leads with truly, unique character in AAA gaming. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with having a strong female lead. In fact, I'm really happy that gaming has embraced women, especially as of late, as becoming more than, just damsels in distress. I mean, 2017 has been an absolutely wonderful year for AAA gaming and female protagonists. But
there's been a lot of interesting developments in the gaming field so far, I have to agree. Mm-hmm. And a lot of problematic things popping up left and right.
Oh, you better believe it. But I can't help but want more. In film and television, characters have a large variety of personalities. Marge Simpson and Lois Griffin are both housewives, but are both completely different. And the reason why is because women are different from other women. I believe that Aloy is a very good character, just one that I've seen before. Hopefully in future games, possibly named Horizon First Dawn. That's a free idea, Sony. Alright? I would love to see her fleshed out more as a more human and relatable character instead of just a character trope. So, what do you think of this trend? Do you believe it exists? And please keep in mind that I know that there are a plethora of indie titles who have cracked the code on this, so I'm strictly speaking of, AAA games as a genre, I guess, category.
Absolutely, and I absolutely believe it's a problem, and it's not even a unique one. It's one that's carrying over from our cultural narrative in various forms of media. We used to talk about the Madonna whore complex, and now we have either the damsel in distress, or we have a female character that's essentially a man with essentially breasts and different clothing, and it's not particularly engaging if you're a narrative-driven gamer, and it's not particularly engaging if you're a woman or even a creatively minded male.
Oh, absolutely. Speaking on the gender skins you were talking about there, I had someone I was talking to recently about, Mass Effect, and they were talking about, how, Mass Effect has embraced, the female protagonist, and I was like, well, not really, in the sense that, yes, Mass Effect, has these choices, and, it's very narrative-driven, and that's great, but at the end of the day, it's male Shepard who's on the box. He's the poster boy for, all of this, and even if you choose to use, female Shepard, it's just a skin for male Shepard, and it's nothing more. Like, they change pronouns, and that's it. So it's not that they've embraced it, they've just added, the option of reskinning him. So that's not the kind of thing I want to see out of this,
Absolutely. And I mean, even honestly, the strong female character trope, it's an inherently flawed trope, because their idea of a strong female character is essentially male. I mean, it's male traits placed over woman, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. There are women that fit that archetype, but there's no variety in it, and there's no emotional complexity in it, and it's not a very genuine representation of what's happening to women today, or even in, say, fantasy narratives.
Absolutely. So who of all of the female protagonists that exist would you say is your favorite? This can exist in any category, AAA, AA, indie, whatever.
Oh, goodness. I'd probably have to say the original. Okay, this is actually a character that unfortunately we didn't get to see, but those dedicated to the fandom have seen snippets of it. And that is the original Lara Croft. I'm sorry. Lara Croft was never actually meant to be the over-sexualized. She's kind of a cross between a damsel in distress and an action hero, but that was never her original intent. I mean, the original intent behind Lara Croft was a unique, adventurous, straightforward action game. And it was only later, through further editing and further developments and the selling of the company, that we got the Lara Croft that we have now. So the original invention was something I was very fond of, at least as a concept, but we don't really see her.
Okay, so just to clarify, we have two Lara Crofts that exist to this day. We have the PlayStation Lara Croft, good old blue tank, cargo shorts, yes. And then we have the Square Enix Lara Croft.
I have a lot of problems with the current narrative involving Lara Croft currently. I have especially problems with the... I can't even remember who said it, but it was someone involved in producing the game Rise of the Tomb Raider, I believe, or Rise of Lara Croft. I haven't played that game. I have no intention of playing that game. But essentially that she was a damsel in distress and not her own heroine. That the whole goal of playing her was to feel protective towards her, not empathize with her or self-project, which is essentially what we play video games for. And that's disturbing to me.
Very interesting. While I can see your point on that, as someone who's played the game, while I can see your point there, when you're going through the game, there are certain things that they do that kind of, I can see what they're talking about with the the whole protection thing, because when you're playing the game, Lara doesn't just die. She dies in various ways, and they edited these things into the game. Like, you fall into a pit of spikes, it shows you her falling into a pit of spikes. So it's like it's that kind of thing in the back of your mind, like, oh my gosh, I really don't want to watch Lara die.
Yeah.
Just explaining. We can go into that later. It's this whole other thing. It's really interesting, though. I hadn't thought of it from that point, though.
I mean, to be fair, like I said, I haven't played the game. I'm only going off of my old fond memories of the very, very, very early versions of PlayStation Lara Croft and things I've read recently that have troubled me. I haven't actually played the game, so it might be a bit disingenuous to comment on it.
No, that's fair. I mean, they are two vastly different Lara Croft. Lara in the new Tomb Raider doesn't just feel like a badass because she is a badass. She has to become a badass, that kind of thing, where she's growing into it, and how an archaeologist would never wear shorts like that to a dig site, but that's a whole other thing about work and wardrobe. Different topic. Okay. So, big fish in the pond here, Metroid Samus.
Yes.
Huge icon for female protagonists in gaming, and something happened a few years ago that many of us will remember, the release of Metroid Other M, and the various issues that people had with that game, be it the narrative, be it the gameplay. Although most people played it, the gameplay wasn't the issue for a lot of people. It was, in fact, the idea that they were trying to give Samus some sort of personality. And whether it was because of, the chain of command that Samus was, being ordered around by a man, or was that she had feelings for him, or the fact that she had any thoughts outside of kill. It shocks me, and it makes me very nervous about the kind of landscape that we have as gamers, because it didn't really bother me that they were trying. The execution was sloppy, yes, I will admit that. But the idea that we were trying to give a personality to someone who had no personality to begin with, I don't think it's a dangerous foray. I don't think that's something we should be afraid to do, especially because she's so iconic the way she is. It's like if someone today tried to give, Princess Peach a backstory. I would love that. I would welcome that. They tried it. It didn't work out too well. They gave her superpowers that were linked to her emotions. Very bad, Nintendo. Don't do it again. But, it's that kind of thing where they were trying to get more out of a character, and the backlash was immense. So, will they ever try it again? I don't know. And I don't think that's a good thing.
It's not a good thing, and it's lazy marketing. And that is something I want to touch on later, which we can get to later, obviously. But people resist change. Of course, there's going to be pushback when you try to change anything about a very beloved character. And even without essentially a personality, she was a beloved character. She is iconic, as you said. There's going to be resistance to that. But there's also an enormous market, a growth market, if you want to call it that, waiting for those kinds of quality changes. And I think, correlation doesn't equal causation. We're seeing a trend with the games being produced where people are saying, oh, well, certain aspects of gaming, like a female lead protagonist or adding backstories, those aren't selling. There's a problem. That's not quite the case. They're not selling because A, they either have half the marketing budget of, say, a male-fronted game, or bad writing, quite honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very easy to blame, the gamers don't want a backstory. But it seems more like lazy writing and lazy execution. You're blaming the wrong thing for something that's very needed. And I think there's a very receptive audience if you give them what they're looking for. I mean, truly, something really worth their time. Yeah. But, I mean, is it going to be a hit at some point? I mean, I mean a financial hit. Then, yeah, probably. And not hit financially in order to change the trends in gaming. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Female characters as a whole can be a tricky business. I believe this begins at a conceptual level. AAA development itself is very risky. These are projects that have tens of millions of dollars sunk into them with things like marketing and research, just to name a few. And so in a very risky business environment already, it comes to stand that venturing outside of the bounds can be looked as, to put it bluntly, irresponsible. Back in the 80s and 90s, there was only one demographic approaching video games, and that was younger boys. All of the marketing was aimed at them, the magazines, commercials, hell, the games as a whole. So you get to the early 2000s where, some of these things were alleviated and some games were directed as female gamers, but even those were geared towards traditional female roles. These were following the same patterns that manufacturers used. Marketing, whether we like it or not, is subject to culture. You had toys like Polly Pocket, Barbie, and various baby dolls. And, as such, video games were marketed just like that. You had fashion games, you had child-rearing games. Hell, there is still Cooking Mama to this day. However, I don't care what anyone says. I love Cooking Mama. She's my girl. Okay? But unfortunately, still to this day, we still see these marketing pushes directed as males. Why? Because males consume the medium more. It's a vicious catch-22, so then you don't make a game with a female protagonist, because, the marketing execs say, hey, the gamers don't relate to them, but I think that's false. I don't believe that. So what do you do? What do you do to get that Master Chief type quality in a female character? You make her tough, you make her just under emotionless, that kind of thing. That way it's like you're playing as Master Chief or Kratos, but, they just happen to lack a Y chromosome. So my question to you becomes, have we moved past this era where making a truly unique female character isn't a risk?
I think it's a risk in certain ways and not in others. I mean, one point I kind of want to bring up here is you said that men are predominantly the main market for video games, but that's changing a bit. And I think it's like 48% of gamers in the US are female. That's an enormous potential market waiting to have a product continuously and repetitively offered so they can continue to fill the consumer void there. And again, I mean, so much of that is marketing. Female-led games are still only receiving 50% of the marketing budget that male-led games are. So, of course they're going to make less money. Of course they're going to be circulated less. Of course there's going to be financial backlash there. That said, I think the idea that a unique female character being a risk it's misplaced. It's infantilizing the male gaming population. It's essentially saying you're incapable of empathizing with someone outside of your immediate experience. And yes, there are people like that. But there's also plenty of creatively minded, interested, engaged individuals that want something unique and want to experience something unique. And there's plenty of women that are desperate for unique characters. So is it a risk? Initially, because yes, we have our market right now is, let's say the standard white brooding male is our default right now. Everything masculine is our quote unquote neutral. But it's consumerism is based on culture, and we create culture with the products that we're making, the narratives that we're introducing. So to take that in a different direction, we have to consistently push new items forward. And if we push new items forward, yes, there will be an initial hit. And yes, that will be a risk financially at first. But if we move past that, suddenly we've tapped into an enormous growth market, and that becomes less and less of a risk, and people's ideas of narratives and games and stories and characters they want, that expands and a whole new market's created.
Beautifully put. However, there are some things that I think we do need to take care of. Starting with the armor. I don't care what anybody says. I'm tired of it. I don't understand how less and less armor, equals more defense. I don't know. It's fan service. It's eye service. I don't know.
I can't survive a battle in chainmail bikinis.
Not that I've researched. I don't have the research. I don't have the numbers to put behind it. But I can't imagine it's very effective.
So much for my bulletproof bra.
Right? Just covers up the naughty bits. Whatever. I don't know. But, I just don't know that, especially like games like Overwatch, it's this hypersexualization of a lot of female characters, and it's like the internet sometimes can be a beautiful place. The internet can sometimes be a very, very mentally tasking place. So it's just, how do we take these goals? How do we put them in such a way that we're taking games like with the success of Overwatch and the like, and we put characters in this, and we say, hey, we're not going to hypersexualize them. We don't need these to be memes. We don't need these characters, to just become pop culture references, 20 years down the road. How do we make these characters stick?
That's a tough question, and I don't know, but I will say, well, I do have a problem with the current trend for female characters. I do get tired of the over-sexualization. They're fantasy objects in the way that all game characters are, but obviously in a much different way to their male counterparts. That said, I think even those characters serve a purpose. Getting more and more of them out in our current culture is beneficial. It's problematic, but it's beneficial because you pave the way by first making a road that a lot of people can tolerate. And then you start creeping into other things. And indie games are doing that. And indie games are becoming enormously popular. And I think that's eventually going to have an important effect on AAA titles. But in the meantime, I think any female lead is better than no female lead. And even the problematic ones serve a purpose. And I think starting from there and slowly branching out and making voices heard and having louder conversations where game developers can hear them, writers can hear them, making it really known in, I hate to use this word, in essentially the internet zeitgeist, let's put it that way. I think that's extraordinarily useful, even if you have to start from a less than desirable base.
Oh, most definitely. Okay. So speaking on, the Eastern and Western, differences, from what I've seen, and this is me, casting a general net, which I hate to do. Okay, for future reference, I really don't like to do this, but there are certain things that we do see, as far as, and this goes back into the portrayal and hypersexualization, and because it's a different culture, it becomes a little bit more difficult to speak on. But have you yourself noticed any differences? Because I've noticed character differences between the two. Have you noticed any that you would?
I don't want to say anything too extreme because again, it's not my culture and different values. the infantilized version of women is definitely prized from what I've seen. And, you know, we have plenty of problems in the Western canon when it comes to our female characters, but we do tend to utilize grown-ass adults, which is nice.
Yes, that's
That's very nice. I'm a fan of that. But, you know, the backlash, what was that game? I think it was called Mirror's Image, the game from Switzerland where they had a half Asian female main character.
Mirror's
and
Edge.
There was
Yeah.
Mirror's Edge, thank you, yes. And there was an enormous backlash to that particular character from gamers in Asia, specifically Japan, because she wasn't their idealized version of beautiful. They felt she was too rough looking, she wasn't young enough, you know, they didn't like the shape of her eyes, they felt she was too Asian looking. I mean, these are disturbing things, and they tend to play into, again, a lot of infantilization of women and a lot of very strict stereotypes that don't particularly interest me.
True. I couldn't agree more. I mean, literally everything I had to say right there. When do you believe that we as gamers will see that bridge, you know, that film and television have made, where you can put big budgets behind things, you can have various different kinds of female characters, because, you know, it's one thing to watch Katniss over here in this movie and then Grace and Frankie over here on Netflix. And by the way, huge plug for Grace and Frankie, love that show. Because I think the most valuable thing that can come out of a character in a video game, because I absolutely love narrative-driven games, is something that I can relate to. Something that I can take away from my experience and say, hey, I'm really glad I watched this. I'm really glad I experienced this. I'm more than willing to, you know, recommend this to other people. That's the whole thing that I have with Grace and Frankie, is that I see a bit of myself in each one of those characters. Whereas, like, you know, in the early 2000s, there was, like, some issues, like, with some of the female roles there. It was just, like, that whole sense of, oh, yeah, I know someone like that, but me, myself, I can't see any qualities myself. That's why, that's personally why I think movies like Mean Girls did so well, is because we saw a little bit of ourselves in each one of the characters there. Whatever you feel about that movie, it's the relatability of it, it's the truth behind it that you're seeing, and so that's why I find it so hard to get behind characters like Aloy, is because that whole rebel without a cause kind of mentality just doesn't speak to me. Yes, I know someone like that, but I myself can't take anything away from that character.
Absolutely. So the question is, when do I think you will be able to bridge that gap? Is that what I understand?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a long road. I'm not overly optimistic about waking up in a year and seeing everything as a bright, shiny new landscape. You know, like I said before, even the problematic characters serve a purpose. And I think the first and most important step we can make is normalizing. And it's useful in that, again, we're having a huge influx of interesting, emotionally driven, narratively driven, even female-led indie games, which is hugely useful. And, you know, a lot of our cultural stories right now, movies used to be the golden age medium, and now it's really shifting to television. And with the shift in television, we're getting long, serialized stories that involve multiple characters, diverse characters. I mean, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imaginations, but it's better than it was. It's a lot better than it was in movies. And that's going to influence the games that are coming out in the market. Of course it is, because it's going to influence writers, it's going to influence developers. And I think the more we start to normalize that and normalize that in games and present it less as a special interest and more as simply a story, that's slowly going to become something that takes place in our cultural mindset. It'll be easier, I think. I hate to generalize like this. I think it'll be easier for certain men to latch on to a female character they can identify with if it's normalized and not presented as a special interest. But, you know, I think we're looking at 5, 10 plus years down the road, maybe more. It's not something that happens overnight. You take the baby steps you can get and hope for the best. One of the things I do think is a driving problem with, you know, the quality of our female leads. We say there's no market for it. And we've already discussed some of the problems with that. There's half the marketing budget. You know, they treat it as a special interest as opposed to trying to normalize it into simply a neutral position. But the big thing is, you know, hire better writers. Writers are kind of the unappreciated geniuses of our day. Mm-hmm. They do all of the grunt work and they're getting underpaid. They're not appreciated. And, you know, they'll hire a lesser writer for less money if they can. And that's going to be an enormous step to getting female characters that are unique and interesting and well-rounded and not just stereotypes of the same old nonsense. Getting writers producing narratives that are worth your attention and your time and hit all the right notes without being, say, a Lifetime movie special with guns.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Rachel, it means so much to have you here. Once again, I'm absolutely honored to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing. Great fun. Really enjoyed this chat. Thank you.
So, Rachel, where can we find you?
So I am Persephonics on YouTube. You can find me there, obviously. I am Persephonical on Twitter and Persephonics Gram on Instagram because I am not creative. And that's about it. I'm lazy when it comes to social media.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to make sure to leave a link toward her channel in the description below, as well as I will be leaving them in the end caps. You should be seeing them anytime soon. All right, and remember, everybody, go out there, get good.
Beautiful. Bye-bye.